Every February, high in the Andes Mountains, about 83 miles southeast of the former Inca capital city of Cusco, the descendants of the ancient Kana people perform a very unique and special carnival. On the surface, Tupay Carnival looks like a simple courtship dance about two young singles meeting, but in reality, it is a ritualistic manifestation of a deeper Andean worldview. The man and the woman actually represent the mating of alpacas through flirtatious dance, competitive verbal jousts, and haunting ancient pinkuyllu melodies, finally culminating in the miming of sexual intercourse to ensure fertility to the land, people, and the livestock. Hi, I'm Ronan, and welcome to the second part of my series on Andean music. In my last video, we talked about the history of the musical style known as huayno, specifically the regional style performed in the city of Cusco. That music being a mix of indigenous American and Spanish musical traditions. But in this video, we will be focusing on the music of Canas, a more remote province in the Cusco department that, in my opinion, is home to some of the most hauntingly beautiful melodies in Andean music. Part 1. Carnaval Province. Before we get into learning about the specific musical traditions and festivals of Canas, we need to learn a bit about the history of the province itself. The name of the province comes from the ancient Kana people who have lived in the modern-day regions of the Canas and Espinar provinces for thousands of years before the arrival of the Spanish, and even long before the spread of the Inca Empire. Their largest city was known as Canamarca, intricately constructed towards the sunrise, with ceremonial structures containing many amazing artifacts and burials. After being incorporated into the Inca Empire, the Kana were some of the Inca's greatest warriors. When the Inca's greatest enemy, the Chanca, invaded the capital city of Cusco, it was the Kana warriors who pushed them out. After the Spanish conquest of Peru, Spanish authorities forcefully relocated millions of indigenous people from their traditional small villages into larger reducciones, or reductions. These grid-patterned towns were constructed to appear like a rural Spanish village, but in reality, their purpose was to Christianize, force tribute tax, and make it easier to abuse the labor of indigenous people. This was massively destructive to indigenous people because of the rampant violence at the hands of the Spanish, illness from poor living conditions, and death from brutal forced labor in mines. Perhaps because of the Kana's warrior legacy echoing through history, in 1780, the legendary Tupac Amaru, born in the Canas province, would organize one of the most important indigenous rebellions in Peruvian and South American history. Along with their resilient strength, the Canas also preserved much of their traditional rituals and music despite centuries of oppression, which we will discuss in Part 2. Carnival. So if this is a carnival, and this is a carnival, then what even is a carnival? The word carnival, originally descending from the Latin expression carnivale, meaning carne, meat or flesh, and valle, farewell or goodbye, refers to how in medieval Europe, Carnival was the last period of feasting and celebration before the fasting period of Lent. During the 16th century, Carnival was spread with Catholicism to many places in the Americas through colonialism. But the cultural significance and meaning of Carnival changed drastically in certain places, with Carnival's heart being a reversal ritual where social roles are reversed and typical expectations for desired social behaviors are suspended. This allowed many non-Christian cultures to continue practicing their rituals, but in the new accepted context of Carnival. Examples of this are numerous, like in Brazilian Carnival, where spiritual and aesthetic traditions from enslaved Africans hold much influence, or in Mexico, where Mesoamerican cultures already had celebrations coinciding around the same time as Carnival. And of course, in the Andes of Peru, where ancient large fertility rituals were allowed to be continually practiced in the context of Carnival, which leads us into Part 3. Tupay Carnival. The Quechua word Tupay means encounter, but in the context of Carnival of Canas, it signifies both a meeting and a confrontation between the Chuku and the single woman. The Chuku, a legendary character in Canas folklore, is a fierce horse rider and tamer, capable of incredible strength and highly skilled in handling the lasso and capturing cattle. He approaches the single woman while playing the pinkuyllu, an ancient large flute made of reeds frequently used for fertility rituals in the region, as a means of seduction and later as a weapon. The pair, continually dancing, engage in song and try to provoke each other through playful verbal mocking.
Akichus vida, apakuleki, akichus vidas, wakuleki, caballo chaipa, angosta lampi.
A ver, vidita, atillas paca, a ver, vidita, balillas paca.
Imama nalla, tina lata, consultirita, casalla lawa.
Pactatak vida, chaupiña tapi, pisita tawa. Pactatak vida, chaupi kustapi, pisita tawa.
They then attempt to throw the other off balance, the whole while still dancing, the woman using a whip and the man using his pinkuyllu. This is a representation of the concept of Tupay. Once the woman falls down, the man mimes sexual intercourse, and if it is the man who falls down, the woman rides him or dances on him. The meaning of the dance is of course related to love and sexuality, but in the context of the Andean worldview, with humanity, Apus, and Pachamama living perpetually close together, the dance is also meant to ensure the productivity of agriculture and livestock, as well as encourage health to the community. The pinkuyllu songs are extremely unique in tonality and structure, very different from huayno, for example. The melodies usually only utilize 4 notes arranged in a microtonal, Lydian-like scale, and there is a common descending pattern that is played slightly differently in each song. Andean folk music using microtonal modes different from strictly European tuned pentatonic scales are more common in rural areas. This is because larger musical groups with multiple instruments are more common in cities, and in order to harmonize with other European instruments like harps and lutes, a more standard pentatonic or hexatonic scale was preferred. While in rural areas with solo instrumental performances, more diverse microtonal scales have survived over the centuries. The oldest publicly available recording of Kanas music is from the 1950s, buried in an obscure record on the traditional music of Peru. In this beautifully haunting recording, 2 common melodies of Kanas are discernible. The first are the common pinkuyllu melodies. and the second is a common charango chillador melody. These are also performed during carnival times, and these melodies are slightly more similar to huayno.
Chupa mate, que llora calienta. Taco chupa mate, que rosa calienta. Soltera puralla, cachorra camucho. Manzana puralla, tosera camucho.
Tupay Carnival is only one example of the extremely diverse regional traditions and cultures of the Andes, and should remind us that Andean culture is not simply one culture. Every department, province, city, and town has its own specific identity, indicative of the diverse tribes and people that lived in those regions for thousands of years before empires and colonialism, and who still live there to this day.